Mara Finch had spent most of her 32 years believing that the safest place in the world was inside other people's stories. Every weekday, precisely at 8:55 IEMM, she slipped through the side door of the Pembroke Public Library, smoothed her skirt, and folded herself behind the oak circulation desk, as though she were a page sliding back into its spine. Talking with patrons always knotted her stomach, but the smell of paper-dry grass, vanilla, smoke unraveled it again. The dozens of lives stacked on the shelves asked nothing of her except attention. Pembroke was a harbor town ringed by pine woods and gossip. Strangers rarely stayed long enough to disturb its routines, which was how the residents liked it. People here nursed grudges the way others nursed sourdough starters. Feuds between families went back generations, rising and collapsing like tides. From Mara's perch behind the desk, she overheard the mutter of those unresolved stories. Calder, whose son hadn't spoken to her since the winter he left for Boston, the Lyman twins, who ran rival bakeries on opposite sides of Main Street, Mr. Cruz, who always renewed the same book about the Appalachian Trail, but everyone suspected would never set foot beyond county lines. On an unusually warm Thursday in April, the maintenance crew unearthed a chest in the library's flooded basement. The box was iron-bound, lid carved with knotwork and a single word in copper plate: reciprocity. Mara was called downstairs to catalog its contents. She pried the lid open, expecting brittle pamphlets or storied water damage. Instead, she found only one object, wrapped in oilcloth, a leather-bound book as black as wet slate, its pages crisp and unmarked. No title, no author, a single violet ribbon marked the first page, which was perfectly, radiantly blank except for a line written in the top margin: write truthfully. One page only. Then close the cover and wait. Mara ran a finger across the paper. It felt warm, almost pulsing. She ought to have logged it, placed it in special collections called the Historical Society, but against all training, she slipped the book into her satchel. Something, some softly humming intuition, told her this narrative wanted privacy for a moment longer. That evening, in her attic apartment above Mrs. Desai's antique shop, Mara set the book on her kitchen table, beside a cup of chamomile. She stared at the glaring white of that first page and wondered what wait meant. Wait for what? For whom? She thought of the ledger of secret hurts she carried for the town. The cousins who wouldn't attend the same farmer's market, the teacher who took her lunch in the supply closet so she wouldn't run into her ex-husband's new wife in the cafeteria. Pembroke felt like a story that had lost its editor, every plot line frayed into silence. Mara uncapped her fountain pen. Her shyness, she'd learned, was merely the price of a sensitive instrument. She hoarded feelings, the way clouds hoarded rain. Tonight, the weight of them ached. She began to write. Paige called her Mrs. her son, Jeremy. She has baked his favorite blackberry scones every Sunday morning for 12 years, hoping he'll walk through the door. If only someone could remind him how warm the kitchen smells and how her hands shake a little when she laughs. One page. Front and back. She paused, pressed her palm to the ink. Then, heart drumming, she closed the cover. Nothing exploded. No ghostly trumpet announced success. Mara set the book on her windowsill, chastising herself for sentimental nonsense, and went to bed. At precisely 6 the next morning, the church bells startled her awake. They never rang on Fridays. She dressed hastily, bolted down the stairs, and found Main Street humming. Mrs. Calder stood in the bakery doorway, tear-streaked and radiant, Jeremy at her side holding a duffel. People gathered not to gossip but to witness, as though joy itself were a fragile creature that might dart away if the crowd breathed too loudly. "I just got this note," Jeremy was saying, voice thick with disbelief. "Slipped under the door of my apartment in Boston. No signature, just, well, you should come home, so I did." He turned the page over, and Mara recognized her own looping script, her lungs folded like paper birds. She wasn't sure whether to feel elated or terrified. The book had delivered her words. That afternoon, the violet ribbon marked a fresh, blank sheet. Lightning bright possibility cracked open inside her. She wrote again, this time about the Lyman twins, June and Joe, famous for sourdough and cinnamon, who hadn't spoken face-to-face since their father died and left the bakery deed unclear. Mara described the sisters as 4-year-olds playing tea party beneath the holly tree, their laughter powdered with sugar, their future braided. One page, she closed the cover, hands trembling. 2 days later, a sign appeared in both bakeries, closed for family business. When they reopened, cinnamon rolls and sourdough boules sat side by side in the display case, and June's and Joe's forearms were dusted with the same flour. No one in town knew how the reconciliation happened. The sisters offered no explanation beyond shy smiles that looked uncannily like forgiveness. News of such coincidences spread through Pembroke like dandelion seeds. A blind scholarship check arrived for a teenager who thought college was impossible. A care parcel appeared on the steps of Mr. Cruz with trail maps, a pair of sturdy boots in his size, and a prepaid bus ticket to Springer Mountain. People whispered about guardian angels or perhaps some Newtown committee. Mara clasped her secret like a briar rose. Each morning, the book presented a clean page. Each night, her sentences blossomed elsewhere into action. Yet the quiet librarian discovered there is a physics to magic. Every wish exerts an equal and opposite consequence. After 3 weeks, she opened the book and found, instead of blankness, a question etched in silver ink. Who heals the healer? She stared, throat tight. Outside, the harbor fog pressed against the windows like damp cotton. Mara considered her life. Parents long dead, no siblings. Friends, certainly colleagues who remembered her birthday, Mrs. Day downstairs, who brewed cardamom coffee, but no one with whom she could be unshyly herself. She lived between sentences rather than in them. The page shimmered empty again, waiting. Mara closed the cover without writing, unsettled. That weekend, Pembroke celebrated the Harbor Festival. Booths lined the docks, live music spiraled over the water, and the smell of fried haddock coated everything. Mara wandered alone, half listening to laughter she wasn't brave enough to join. At dusk, a voice behind her said, "They're beautiful, aren't they?" She turned. Simon Hale, the new history teacher, stood holding 2 paper boats tipped with candles, one for the traditional lantern launch honoring loved ones past. Simon was tall, brown-skinned, glasses sliding down his nose, the kind of man whose kindness felt immediately legible. He nodded toward the boats. "I made an extra, in case someone forgot." He smiled tentatively. "Would you like it?" Mora accepted, words stuck behind her teeth. Together they knelt at the water's edge. She thought of her mother's humming, her father's knock-kneed dancing in the kitchen. So small, you couldn't shelve them in any library classification. She set the candle afloat. Simon's boat followed, their reflections wavery and trembling beside one another. They talked, then, easily as turning pages. Simon asked about her favorite obscure collection, 19th century botanical journals. Confessed he played the mandolin badly, but with enthusiasm. Admitted he was learning Pembroke's naughty history for his sophomore elective. Mara felt herself unfolding one shy corner, then another. That night, the book greeted her with blank readiness. She hesitated, remembering the silver question. Simon's kindness had smoothed something ragged in her. Perhaps this was how the healer healed, not by demanding, but by allowing. She wrote a new page, the most delicate yet, for Simon Hale, who lights boats for strangers because he knows everyone has lost someone. May he find friends who see him as thoroughly as he sees others. She closed the cover. 2 days later, Simon entered the library during a lull. He carried a wrapped bundle of lilacs and an old mandolin songbook he hoped to donate. Their conversation lasted an hour, then 3. When he left, Mara's cheeks ached from smiling. Weeks passed. The invisible correspondence between Mara's pen and Pembroke's surprises continued. A mechanic secretly paid the medical bills of the waitress who had once fixed his coffee just the way he liked. The reclusive poet sent signed first editions to the school's struggling literature club. A playground fence was repaired overnight by hands that left no signature. The town began to look at itself differently, as if everyone's reflection had been cleaned. Still, Mara worried. Power, even gentle power, could be misused. She wrote cautiously, always kindness, always healing. But stories are living things. They resist cages. One June afternoon, Mayor Huxley strode into the library with unusual purpose. A former real estate developer, he had the unnerving habit of speaking as though addressing a microphone, even in casual conversation. "Miss Finch," he said, "there's a rumor I've come to verify. People say you know something about the miracles happening in this town." Mara's pulse jumped. "I'm just a librarian, sir." "Just a librarian," he repeated thoughtfully, as though the phrase were a riddle. "I've noticed your accession logs include an untitled artifact retrieved from the basement, some kind of manuscript?" "It's being preserved," she lied. He gave a politician's smile, pleasant, empty. "Pembroke has an opportunity, Mara. Imagine the tourism if we branded ourselves as the town of everyday miracles. Grant money, press, maybe a cable documentary. People would flock here to write requests, pay good money for the chance." Her stomach clenched. "That's not how it works. But it could." His eyes sharpened. Artifacts belong to the municipality, not personal collections. I'll expect a report by Monday. When he left, the library felt suddenly airless, as if someone had dog-eared the horizon. Mara hurried home and opened the book. A page awaited, blank and gleaming. She lifted her pen, hesitated. Could she use it to stop Huxley? She pictured him stumbling on the truth and selling kindness by the ticket. The thought curdled. Magic fueled by generosity could not be turned toward greed without poisoning itself and her. Instead, she wrote, may the town of Pembroke choose cooperation over profit, compassion over spectacle. May those who seek to exploit kindness find their hearts unmade and remade by the very tenderness they dismissed. She hoped the book understood nuance. Sunday afternoon, Simon knocked on her apartment door holding 2 coffees and a stack of local history maps. You sounded worried on the phone, he said. Thought company might help. They spread the maps across her table. Mara explained Huxley's threat, the chest, the pages. She waited for disbelief, but Simon listened the way roots listen to rain, silently, thoroughly. I believe you, he said at last. And I think the town does too, whether they know it or not. Mara touched the book's cover. If Huxley demands it, I can't lie. And if he takes it, Simon shook his head. Stories are more than objects. Maybe it's time Pembroke wrote its own pages. The next morning, Mayor Huxley convened a special council meeting in the town hall auditorium. Words spread. By dusk, nearly every resident of Pembroke occupied a folding chair or leaned against the back wall. Mara sat beside Simon, the book hidden in her messenger bag. Huxley stepped to the lectern. Friends, extraordinary events require extraordinary leadership. Our town is experiencing unexplainable acts of charity. We must document, regulate, and yes, share them with the world. He outlined a proposal, a miracle registry, visitor passes, corporate sponsorship. The room buzzed with uneasy murmurs. Then, Mrs. Calder rose, hands still dusted with flour. She cleared her throat. Sir, with respect, none of these kindnesses were done for profit. The Lyman twins stood. Our bakery was saved not by permits, but by forgiveness, Mr. Cruz added, voice shaking. Someone believed I could walk that trail. I leave next week. You can't trademark belief. One by one, the townspeople testified. Each spoke of a page, unnamed, unsigned, that had entered their life like a small sunrise. No one knew the author, but it no longer mattered. The narrative belonged to all of them. Finally, Simon Hale approached the lectern. Every miracle here started as a sentence of hope, he said gently. Hope cannot be monetized without killing it. If we try to own kindness, we forfeit it. Silence rippled outward. Deep and settling, Mayor Huxley looked around, seeing not potential donors but neighbors whose goodwill would evaporate the moment he commodified it. He swallowed, straightened papers never meant to be read. Very well, he said, forcing a smile. This was only a preliminary discussion. Applause followed him offstage, not for his concession, but for their collective refusal. That night, in her apartment scented of lilacs and library dust, Mara opened the book. A single line waited, well written. She laughed, a sound of pure release. Then, without planning, she slid the tome across the table to Simon. Your turn, she whispered. He blinked. What should I write? Whatever the town needs tomorrow. Simon hesitated, then put pen to paper. I wish Mara Finch would see herself the way Pembroke now sees her, as the author of renewed faith. I wish she'd trust that the story includes her, too. He closed the cover. The violet ribbon quivered as if approving. In the morning, Mara awoke to a knock. She opened the door to find the street lined with neighbors. Mrs. Desai, the Lyman twins, Mr. Cruz in his new boots, Jeremy and his mother holding a tray of blackberry scones, the ordinary citizens of Pembroke bearing extraordinary affection. We figured it out, June said, blushing. Maybe not how, but who. And we thought you might like some company. They presented her with gifts, a library endowment fund in her name, a journal handmade from bakery parchment and trail maps, a promise from the high school's drama club to catalog the library's neglected music section, and a handwritten schedule of volunteers for story hour so she could take occasional afternoons off. Mara's eyes blurred. Words failed her, which felt fitting. This was beyond language. She stepped back, inviting them in. Her once quiet apartment filled with laughter, steam from Mrs. Desai's coffee, the rustle of pages as children discovered her shelves of beloved classics. Later, when the crowd dispersed, Simon lingered. They sat on the fire escape watching gulls wheel past pink clouds. Mara said, I spent my life hiding in stories. The book showed me that writing one can pull you out where the light is. Simon brushed a lock of hair behind her ear. The light suits you, librarian. Below them, Pembroke glowed houses soft with lamplight, harbor masts stippled against twilight. The town was still imperfect, still opinionated, and occasionally ornery, but its narrative had shifted. People had learned that anonymity could be another form of intimacy, that healing someone else often stitched up your own hidden seam. Inside, the black book rested on Mara's desk, ribbon marking yet another blank page. They would keep writing, she and Simon and anyone else moved to try. Maybe someday the pages would run out, maybe not. Either way, Pembroke had learned the simplest spell. Write one kind sentence, close the cover, wait, and in the space of that waiting, lives would change. Not because magic insisted, but because people, given a glimpse of what could be, chose to finish the story themselves.